All right, so hello everyone again, and welcome to How to Ace Your Next Job Interview. My name is Calvin Landrum, and I'm a training coordinator here at AmeriCorps VISTA, and I'm joined by Liz Matthews, VISTA alumni and employer team lead. Liz has been with CNCS for 8 years and served as a VISTA in Lake Charles, Louisiana, at the women's shelter, at a women's shelter in the mid-90s. So hello, Liz.
Hello, Calvin.
So glad you could be here with us today. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to be talking about interviews, obviously. We're going to be talking about, how to prepare for an interview, what you're going to want to do before that interview. We're going to talk about what to do during the interview, so that you can be your best on the day of, and then what to do post-interview, what sort of follow-up should you be doing. I saw in the chat that some of you have been posting and writing responses to the chat question. Congrats, Kamal, for getting a job. Very proud of you. Good job. That's what we like to hear. We like to hear you guys going on to do bigger and better things. You didn't even have to interview, it sounds like. I don't know. Maybe it did. But congratulations anyway. Maybe you'll be able to share with us some of your some tips of your own, that maybe helps you land that job. So before we jump into the real meat of this presentation, please take a second to answer the poll at the right side of your screen. Question number 1 is, where are you in your service year? And if you're an alum, when did you finish? And question 2 is, how many job interviews have you had in your career so far? Again, you'll see those poll questions to the right side of the screen. So go ahead and take a second to answer those, and we'll see what your responses are. Now, Liz, you only did 1 year of service, correct?
I did only do 1 year of service, but it was an amazing experience, and enough so that I wanted to come work for the AmeriCorps VISTA headquarters someday.
Very nice. Did you work for AmeriCorps VISTA headquarters immediately after that, or did you kind of detour and go around?
No, I did not. When I finished my VISTA term, I moved up to here to Washington, D.C., and I temped for a little while, which is a bit painful, but you got to pay the bills. And then I was able to get my first job. So I've been in the nonprofit world, and I took a spin in the for-profit world, and I've also started my own business. So it's great, though, to finally be here at CNCS and AmeriCorps VISTA HQ.
Very nice, very nice. Marcia Strong says, I hear nothing. Oh, well, I guess I shouldn't address that because you can't hear me, but you should call the number at the bottom of the slide. All right, so that poll just closed, and let's see what everyone said. All right, so it looks like everyone is nearing, or most people are nearing the end, which makes sense that you'd be on this webinar. Getting closer to the end of service, applying for jobs, about to start having those interviews. Let's see, how many job interviews have you had in your career? It's like most people say 5 or more. That's a lot of interviews.
That's impressive. I'm surprised at that. That's
I'm
good.
also surprised. That's kind of, I honestly think that, I don't know how many interviews I've had in my life, but I feel like it is maybe 5, crazy.
Great, but we do have VISTAs who are serving in all different stages of their career, so
totally.
That is wonderful to see. And likewise, some of the real benefits of participating in these webinars is that you all are getting information from us, but you're also exchanging it with each other. So by all means, continue to share your experiences and your tips in the chat room.
Totally. Mary said she's had 3 this week alone.
Wow, that's Mary, you're ready for the weekend,
yeah,
Mary.
Yeah. Mary's like, you're probably an old pro. You can probably teach this session.
All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you, Calvin, and thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. We know that you all are doing so many things, and it does take some discipline to sit down and join one of the webinars, so we really appreciate it, and we hope you get a lot out of this. So as Calvin mentioned, it really is helpful to think of the interview process in these 3 different stages. You have your before, your prep stage, and then you have during, which is all about your composure and how you perform during the interview, and then afterwards, which is about the follow-up. So we'll go through this webinar with that in mind. So the first thing we want to think about, the most important thing you can do to prepare for an interview is to research the employer thoroughly and the position for which you are being interviewed. So think about, you know, read their websites thoroughly and what information is the company pushing out through their websites and through social media. We say thoroughly, and we have an example from Jessica, who's actually in the background helping us administer this webinar, and she has a good example of this. She says, I once interviewed for an event coordinator role at a large hospital foundation. In the interview, I was asked specifically if I'd reviewed their website, to which I answered yes. But to my embarrassment, it became clear in the interview that they had an entirely separate website just for their event planning department, and I'd only looked at the main site for the foundation. If I'd just done a quick search or spent more time, I wouldn't have missed it. When preparing, I had spent all of my time thinking about my experience and skills, but didn't spend enough time learning about the employer and how they operate, and it showed. So thank you for that example, Jessica. And that brings up another point. So while it is about you, it's also really not about you. The employer has a certain skill set in mind when they are hiring for a position. And they are also looking for someone who will fit in with the company culture. So if you have the skill set and the experience they are looking for, then it really is up to you to make sure that this comes through in the interviewing process. Likewise, I just want to mention that you are also interviewing them. You certainly do not want to enter a toxic culture or one that really is not a great fit for you. So this is an opportunity for you to check them out and interview them as well. But that is also why it's important to thoroughly understand what the organization does, who are their partners, how do they conduct their business, and what is it really like working at the organization. And by the way, I'm going to use the terms business and organization interchangeably because sometimes you may be looking for a job with a for-profit corporation and other times you may be staying with a nonprofit or going into a government agency. So how do you go about researching the employer and the company culture? You want to see how the company is portrayed through the organization's lens. So again, what are they pushing out there? Through their website or sites, their press releases, look at in the news section. Most companies have that as part of their website. And check out all of their social media channels. What information are they sending out and what do they want people to know about them? So make sure you're clicking on all of the links and the sub-pages, and if you're applying for a specific job within a department, research that department's sub-page. So for example, if you ever were going to interview here at AmeriCorps VISTA at CNCS, you would definitely want to not just go to nationalservice.gov. That would be one place that you want to look through thoroughly, and we know that would take you a bit of time, but we also would want you to check out the VISTA campus. So just keep that in mind and take your time and really be thorough about getting to everywhere where the company has a footprint. What can you learn about their current priorities or initiatives? Organizations will often post their strategic plan or a business plan that can help you find out about what their priorities are for the next few years. And this in turn can help you prepare for how you want to make the case that you can contribute to their priorities. So when you look at their social media channels and their footprint out there, that's going to provide you with more insights. What do they want their donors, partners, volunteers, clients to know? LinkedIn is also a fantastic tool for the job search. If you're not already on LinkedIn, really, if you're in a job search, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go ahead and create a profile. It doesn't take very long. And of course, we want you to put AmeriCorps VISTA in your profile under your experience. Yes, we do. But the LinkedIn can not only provide you with the nuts and bolts of the company, but you can also find out the information that they're promoting through their updates. And they also have a new feature called Life that some companies have built out, and the purpose of that is so that users get a sense for the company's culture, what it's like on the inside. All right. right, so we're moving along. We also, not only are you going to want to take a really careful look at everything that the company is pushing out, but you also want to look to see what other people are saying about them. So Google's your best friend here. So search the company's name and see what you find. Have they been highlighted in the media? If so, is it good news, bad news? Is it local, national, international? And if so, what for? For example, if you're searching for a job related to healthcare right now, you're going to want to really carefully follow what's happening with the Affordable Care Act. So you really want to stay on top of current events that are associated with the organization or the business. And then you want to take a look at who are they connected to on social media, who are they following, and you can dig deeper and check out those organizations because it may come in handy during your interview questions. So not only are you looking at the content being posted by the company, but you also want to see who they're following, like I said. So just really take a look at what value do they have. Perhaps these can tell you more things that you want to know and can integrate throughout your interview process and also in follow-up thank you notes. So speaking of social media, actually now is a good time to mention that your potential employer will be Googling you. I don't hire anybody these days without having looked them up online. So if you do not have a clean social media footprint, now is the time to clean that up. So just as an aside there.
Oh, and we actually have a webinar on the VISTA campus about, that deals a lot with cleaning up your social media profiles, what people are looking for, what they're not looking for, some things to be aware of. And also keep in mind, again, take a look at those Hatch Act provisions because if you are trying to be hired federally, you are going to be bound by the Hatch Act. So if you are kind of walking the line of those Hatch Act prohibitions, which are those rules that govern, what you can do politically, that could be to your detriment. So make sure that you take a look at that also whenever you're looking at your social media profile.
Super. Thank you for that, Calvin. And you can find all those webinar archives on the VISTA campus. So you also want to take a look at the organization's financial viability. You don't want to be going somewhere, did they just lay off a bunch of employees 6 months ago? Are they turning a profit? Is this a startup? How long have they been in business? How long have they been profitable? So these websites, GuideStar is really useful for the nonprofit world, and the Better Business Bureau can help you out if you're interviewing with a corporation. Okay, moving along, you also want to do your research on the person who is conducting the interview. So you may not know if it's a panel situation, and my heart goes out to the person who interviewed with 8 different people for 3 hours. You deserve a prize for that. But if you at least have the person who your main contact is, that is really helpful. So look them up on LinkedIn and see if you have any connections to them. I mean, that's why LinkedIn is so great in this situation, because you can see how many degrees of separation you have from the person that you're looking at. If you know someone that knows them, get in touch with that mutual connection and let them know that you're about to have a job interview with that person. What can they tell you about them? They may have insights to share that will help during your interview. And if the interview went really well, by all means, call upon your contacts to send a notice and let the employer know that you're a great candidate. In fact, you don't even have to wait until that point. I've been on both ends of this, and I have been approached by people who say to me, hey, I know that you're having an interview with so-and-so, and I just wanted to let you know they're a fantastic employee. I worked with them for, 5 years, and they're really wonderful. And that is very helpful, obviously, to the job candidate. And the employer is really looking for anything that is going to differentiate from all the candidates. And so if you're plucked out from a pile because of a contact that happens to know the person that you're interviewing with, by all means, utilize that. So check out their online bios. Has the person written any articles, blog posts, white papers? How long have they been at the organization? What is their previous work experience? And the point here is to try and find a connection to the person so that you can mention it during your interview, and again, set yourself apart from the other candidates. I remember when I was applying for a position at a National Literacy Council before I came to work at CNCS, I realized there was somebody on staff that I had worked with at a previous job. So I immediately got in touch with them, and that probably helped in me getting hired. So don't be bashful about that. And, you know, use the personal things too. When my first job, after having been here in DC, after being a VISTA, when I interviewed, the person that was interviewing me also graduated from the University of Wisconsin. So that was an immediate bond, and I think that helped. And also, when I interviewed here at CNCS, the person I was interviewing with, my potential boss, had a mug on the table from the local NPR station here in town, WAMU, and I said, oh, my husband works at NPR, and, you know, I'm a huge listener too, and so we immediately had this bond. So just use those personal connections. Don't be afraid to pull upon that during your interview process, because it just helps to humanize the whole process. All right, I think we have a chat question here. So what are some common interview questions you might expect to be asked? And for those of you who have been in the interview process recently, you can feel free to share any questions that you have been asked.
Yeah, common interview questions. So I'm trying to think of what I've been asked previously. Alex Grant's his greatest weakness, 3 best qualities. Everyone says biggest weakness. Tell me about yourself. We'll
get to that.
Like 3 people in a row said, tell me about yourself. Can you travel? Why should we hire you? I think that's ooh, describe your ideal supervisor. That's a little dangerous. I like that. If you describe and does not describe the person you'll be working for, that can get a little tricky. Why do you want this job? Because I need a job. No, that's not a good answer. If an elephant came to your bedroom window, what would you do? Wow, okay. That's very creative. How would you handle a stressful situation? How would you handle a disgruntled customer? That's super important if you're working in customer service. Define social justice. Sell me this pen. Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. Describe you. Talk about a time when you showed initiative. Yeah, I feel like I've gotten in previous job interviews a lot of situational questions, or like, tell me about a time when you did this thing. You know, tell me about a time when you took the lead on a project. Oh, right. That is a Wolf of Wall Street. Sorry, I'm bad with my movies. Okay. How many golf balls could we fit into a bus? Who knows the answer to that question? All right. Well, these are all great contributions. We're going to also post a link in the chat to a great article. There's a wonderful resource called The Muse, and there's a list of very common interview questions that I highly recommend that you check out. Such as some of the things that you've already mentioned. Tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? What's your dream job? So it's just really important to anticipate the questions that you will be asked, and then, of course, come up with the ones that you want to ask. So we'll get to that part in a minute. But so one of the things that you want to do is to, it may have been a while since you were offered this interview opportunity. It might have been a while since you actually applied for the job. So go back and reread the job announcement and have some examples ready to demonstrate that you have the experience required to do the job. So just a little tip. In the past, I've actually taken a position description, copied it into a Word document, and then wrote out examples from my experience underneath each of the qualifications from the job announcement.
because you really want to be able to draw on from specific examples, and you have to have a variety of examples. As someone who interviews people, I get a little bit bored if all of their examples are from the job that they just had. You can dig deep. I mean, even if you go back to college and maybe you served on some committee or something, but mix it up so that it shows a variety of answers and scenarios. So speaking of scenarios, obviously you all are familiar with this. It's quite the popular interviewing technique right now. So you really want to be prepared to offer a response for a scenario question. So we've seen some in the chat room. Others may include, you have just been asked to complete 3 different assignments that have the same deadline. How do you prioritize your tasks? Or, tell me about a time when you disagreed with a colleague and had to come to a resolution. So I think the reason why employers ask these questions is because they really want an insight into your thought process. Do you crack under pressure? Can you handle multiple deadlines? They just want to know how you're going to handle yourself. What's your composure like? And usually past behavior is indicative of future behavior. All right, the dreaded questions. We've all been there. So how do you handle, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses? Or, so if asked about your weaknesses, there's definitely several ways to handle it, which is not what I did in an interview. Early on in my career, when I was asked what my weaknesses are, I literally, my mind drew a blank, and I could not think of any weaknesses, which is ridiculous because, of course, we all have them. So to avoid that, have some on hand and spin it into a positive. You can offer how you handled the situation and what you learned to have that situation not happen again. You can pick something that is not relevant to this position. If you're applying for events planning, you don't want to talk about the fact that you're not detail-oriented. That would be bad. And then when you're asked about your strengths, don't pick being a perfectionist. You know, nobody expects perfection, and that's kind of obnoxious. Yeah. So you can leave that out. But for strengths, be ready with a couple of examples and have job-related stories to back it up. So I'm going to turn it over to Calvin here for a minute because he's got some examples to share about both a weakness and a strength question that he was asked.
Ooh, put me on the spot.
Indeed.
So I guess typically, you know, as we were preparing for this interview, I started for this webinar, I started thinking, you know, what are my strengths and weaknesses? So I'm going to share with you guys sort of what I came up with. I hope they're good. I hope they pass muster. Please let me know in the chat question if you would hire me based off of these responses or if I need to tweak them a little bit. But you're my test audience, so we're going to see. So for my weaknesses, you know, I'm a pretty high-level person who I think I'm really good at seeing the big picture, and I can generally see a clear path to an end. But what that means for me is that I can be really impatient when waiting for smaller details to work out and for standard processes to take the time that they need. Often in my previous job, you know, I'd work on a project where I would need clearance from management on something or would need to gather feedback and synthesize information in order to move forward. But waiting for those things would really kill me because I just want to complete the project and get it done with, you know, and move on to the next thing. You know, I took a look, you know, at why that was frustrating me and sort of realized that by digging deeper and by waiting for things to play out, I was able to gain a deeper understanding of why the systems exist and why it needs to go through this process. You know, and I was also able to suggest, you know, improvements in processes that increase efficiency and improve transparency in our external processes. Yeah, so I think that's my weakness is that I can be a little impatient when waiting for things, but by, you know, sort of looking at it, I've learned to, you know, look at the reason for that and why it takes so long and understand that it really does result in a better product. Great. Yeah.
And how about your strengths?
Oh, my strength.
I know you have so many, Calvin. Just pick one. Just pick one.
One of my strengths, I would say, is that I'm a great editor, and I've got a really good eye for design. I feel really attuned to aesthetics, you know, and I know when things look good or portray a desired emotion are appropriate or, you know, and would make for good distribution. and because of this, I've been asked to edit many campaigns and documents, and I'm often called upon to give design suggestions for external outward-facing publications. I don't always know my way around Photoshop, the more technical part, but if you put me in the room with a good designer, and we'll turn out a beautiful project. Along those lines, I'm really great at giving feedback, both positive and negative, in a way that's sensitive to the receiver, but also gets the point across. Years of facilitation during my tenure in AmeriCorps and in my role as a training coordinator have exposed me to many different people, all with varying styles of communication and levels of comfortability with criticism, so I've had to adapt.
Great. Thank you, Calvin.
Thanks.
I like some more of the things that are being said in the chat. Kristen says that she always says her weakness is public speaking, unless, of course, that's the main role of the position. Good call, because so many people can relate to that.
Well, I think she also put a really good tip in here, which I really enjoy. She says, create a nonlinear career path as an asset. You have diversity and adaptability. I think that's so important. So people say, I've had 10 jobs in my life because I just keep moving around. I've been in college, That shows that you're capable of doing a wide range of things, You're able to get these jobs in the first place, so that's something. And also, you're able to do all these things, and I'm sure you've picked up different skill sets from all of these positions. So I agree, treat that as an asset.
Yes, and then for strengths, Peter says that he has a real skill with analysis, which really is this day and age to do, whether it's social media analytics or creating databases and really knowing your way around Excel. Not everybody has those skills, so that's really great.
Emmanuel, I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke, but I said that one of my weaknesses was the English language in an interview, and I don't know if that's funny or not.
Well, he might not be a native English speaker, so I think, that's fine. I think, people really do appreciate diversity in a workplace, and depending on what type of organization it is that you are applying to, that might not be an issue. I think anytime you can come across how willing you are to learn, how you really just want to, you have the ambition and the patience to try and to learn, I think those things all come across well, too. All right. So let's move along to talking about AmeriCorps VISTA. So this is really important, obviously, for you all, and you're going to interview with people who know what AmeriCorps is, and you're going to interview with people who have no idea what that is. So you really do want to prepare a quick description that explains it. You don't want to also, as I mentioned before, spend all of your interview time drawing upon your VISTA experience. So make sure that you can concisely explain what you do or did as an AmeriCorps VISTA member and how it is relevant to the position for which you are applying. We recently had a webinar in April that was devoted to this topic. So again, we encourage you to check back on our webinar archives. So it's a good idea in advance to prepare a quick 1 to 2 sentence to describe your VISTA service in case the employer is not familiar. And when preparing for possible interview questions, remember you can pull upon your monthly reports or your VAD to help you identify your accomplishments from your year of service to highlight your answers. And these could be data points like the number of dollars raised or volunteers recruited or stories about how you really felt like you made a difference at your service site. And the webinar that we mentioned also talks about how to keep a portfolio of your service accomplishments. So there's a link there to that toolkit. And I know Calvin does this. I just think it's such a great idea to keep a running list of all of your accomplishments. And you can email that to yourself. You can create a document on Evernote or one of those other online tools, but just keep a running list because it's really going to come in handy when you need examples either for resume bullets or interview stories. Okay, so this is, a quick snapshot from my service. I served as an AmeriCorps VISTA member in southeastern Louisiana at a domestic violence shelter. It was an amazing experience as I was given greater responsibility than I would have had at an entry-level job. I was able to create lasting change for the organization by developing a teen dating violence curriculum that is now delivered throughout the area high schools. So that's just a quick version from my experience. I talked to another colleague here who served last year and has been an Eli Siegel Fellow here at CNCS, and this is his that I'm going to share with you. My role at Volunteer Houston was to recruit volunteers and agencies to use our Volunteer Connection platform to stay engaged. At the beginning of my service term, I realized my organization may be underutilizing this tool. So I conducted an analysis of how we could improve the platform's performance, and over the course of my VISTA term, we revamped our website, launched a Google AdWords campaign, and became the first volunteer center in the country to develop a mobile app for finding volunteer opportunities. And I'm proud to say we increased our registrations by over 50%. So just think about it. If you don't have your quick blurb yet, we encourage you to spend a little time and practice with someone. If you serve with other VISTAs, go ahead and take turns practicing that so that you can be more and more comfortable with summarizing your experience. All right. So based on the research you've conducted, now it's time to prepare your, I would say, 10 to 15 questions that you might be able to ask during your interview. So when the interviewer asks if you have any questions, your answer should be...
Yes, of course I do.
That's right. So, and remember, just a little aside hint here, the interviewer should talk more than you do. So just keep that in mind. You will have your turn to ask questions, but just remember they really should be talking more than you do. So another good practice to have in this process is anytime you can insert yourself into the role when asking a question or answering a question, do so. And that way the employer actually can start to visualize you in the role. So taking these questions on the slide, how would you describe a typical day and week in this position? Better yet, you can say, if I were in this role, can you describe what I might be doing on a typical day or in a typical week? So just inserting yourself into that question. And then you really want to let them know how much you've researched the company. This can be revealed through the questions that you ask. So I noticed in the job description I would be doing event planning. Can you please tell me more about that? So there are definite ways to make sure that you are integrating into your questions the knowledge. You can say, I've noticed that you all have been in the news a lot lately. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how it might have impacted you all? This kind of thing. So feel free to throw some more things up in the chat that you might have experienced and you might have been able to ask in that format. Yes, Calvin?
Bree asked, is it okay to have a list written for our questions, or do we have to memorize them? I think it's an excellent question.
It is an excellent question. By all means, you do not need to have them memorized. Bring a pad of paper. When I see people who come interview and they don't have a pad of paper and a pen, I'm wondering what's going on there.
Yeah.
I expect you to have papers. And you know, just as an aside, take your time. You know, when people ask you a question in an interview, and this is also important on the phone, to take a moment, take a breath, and then start answering. Just take a moment to compose yourself, and I think that's totally fine. So by all means.
Yeah, totally. And it just looks like you care. You know, if you have, you know, some questions prepared, you took the time to look things up, to actually think about this, and I think that reads well coming into an interview. I mean, you wouldn't go into a meeting unprepared without any questions, without knowing, you know, what's going on beforehand, so your interview shouldn't be any different.
Absolutely. So, and also taking notes during the interview, I think that's really helpful, especially the scenario questions. I mean, I often would want to jot down exactly what the question is that I'm being asked so I can remember, especially if it's a multiple part question. So by all means, use those notes and papers to write down notes and questions throughout the process. Okay, so this may be obvious, but what not to ask? You don't want to go in there and say, so what do you guys do? When can I take time off for vacation? Did I get the job? And in regards to pay and salary and negotiation can be an entire webinar in and of itself, but I will just say that Don't bring up the salary in the first interview. It's safe to ask it when it's clear that they are really more committed to you and you're moving forward in the direction of getting the job. Then by all means, you would want to know what the compensation is going to be, and as well as the benefits. It's also really important to know that there are certain questions that are actually illegal for employers to ask you, and those are related to the following topics. Anything about age, race, ethnicity, or color, gender or sex, country of national origin or birthplace, religion, disability, and marital or family status or pregnancy. So now I want to ask you, have any of you asked a question that you immediately regretted during an interview? So if so, please share that in the chat.
And also, what are some interview questions that maybe you've asked, maybe ones that you asked that went well, ones that maybe didn't go so well?
Absolutely. So just feel free to share either.
Another note on our on the topic, of having like a piece of paper and a pen. If you're a nervous person or a nervous interviewer, that can also be something that will ground you in that interview. So just having something in your hand, taking those notes can really help you focus and say, okay, I can breathe. It's kind of like you're not out there by yourself. You're just like, you have something kind of with you. Don't let it steal all your focus, but I know that can help me sometimes, if I have something in my hand, something to write with, something to kind of distract me a little bit.
That's great. I like what Mary says. What is the best quality to have for someone in this position? That's a nice question. Do you enjoy, or what do you enjoy about working here? That's
also,
great.
Do you enjoy working here?
Yeah, so do you enjoy working here? Yeah, I think, how would you describe the office culture? I think that's really important. That goes back to the fact that, you are interviewing them as well. And if it's a culture that doesn't respect the work-life balance and people are there until 9 o'clock every night, but work-life balance is really important to you, then that is really something to consider.
Hey, Kristen, so will you put your question in the Q&A, because I want to come back to that later. I don't want to lose it. Scott, what goals do you expect the ideal candidate to achieve by the end of their first 3 months?
Ooh, that's nice.
That's deep.
What legacy does your organization hope to leave behind? You guys are good.
Yeah. Yeah, these are good too. Yeah, and Trishan, also put your question in there too. I see that, Catlin. I want to answer that one too, or at least try to get some different perspectives.
I like this one from Irene. What does your company do to maintain high morale? That's really nice.
Unlimited vacation.
Yeah,
no,
some places do that.
I know some places do.
And then it's up to you to take the responsibility to take the time accordingly.
The MCS does not do that. So don't.
Federal government not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move along, and still in our preparation mode, getting ready. So it's really important, and again, this may seem obvious, but I've had people come in and they don't look like they've gotten a good night's sleep. Make sure you've eaten. It would be embarrassing to have your stomach growl in the middle of an interview. Have the right amount of caffeine if you do consume caffeine, whether, you just don't want to have too much or too little. And really important, if the interview is in person, go ahead and map your route out ahead of time. If the directions are really confusing and you're not familiar or you've just moved to town, a few days in advance, go ahead and get there and figure out which bus you're going to take or where you're going to park, or just make sure that these types of logistics don't hang you up, and you don't want to arrive stressed out, discombobulated, you're going to start off in the negative there. So I always like to arrive early, go to the restroom, take one last look in the mirror, do a power stance. I saw that in the chat room earlier. And then, if you get there and there is a receptionist, you can say, I know I'm here early, I'm here for an interview with so-and-so at 1 o'clock, that kind of thing. Okay, so getting ready by a video and phone. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to have interviews these days. This clip, I highly encourage you all later to Google this. It's really pretty funny because a recent BBC interview, and maybe you all have seen this, but went viral because this reporter's kids crashed into his home office when giving an interview on international TV. So it was pretty comical. But anyways, you want to really make sure that for Skype and a phone interview, if your interview is over the phone, make sure that you're in a quiet location. The coffee shop may not be the best place for that, and that you have good coverage. And if you're on Skype, practice, practice, practice. Make sure that your lighting is good, that you're looking at the camera, not at your screen, which is such a tendency for us to do. You can always put a little sticky on your computer telling you where to look. And then make sure there's not anything odd in the background. Your plant at home may look lovely, but it may look like it's coming out of your head when you're on Skype. So just make sure that nothing is behind you that's distracting, such as a small child as well. I know that I did a Skype interview at one point, and I practiced looking into my setup through an iPad, and then based on what I saw, I ended up stacking books under my computer and changing the angle of my computer to improve the background as well as the lighting. Okay, so a couple of important tips during the interview. So it's hard for some and for many to stay calm and confident, but if you've done your research and you have your list of questions, you can have a certain sense of confidence that will hopefully carry you through the interview. So trying to stay calm, make sure if it's in person that your handshake is firm, and if we were doing this training in person, I would make you turn to the person next to you and shake their hand, because you don't want it too soft, you don't want it too firm, just make it just right. Show your enthusiasm to be there. Smile. This is really important over the phone. It really does come across when you smile over the phone. Don't be afraid to use appropriate humor. I was once asked to tell a joke in an interview. It was terrible, and I only know one joke, and I really shouldn't have told it.
To tell a joke?
Yes.
Oh.
That was bad. Needless to say, I did not get that job. So be your best professional self. Again, it may sound obvious. Don't text, don't chew gum, don't wear strong perfumes or colognes, because people can be sensitive to that. You don't want that to be distracting. I finished an interview one time, and I walked the gentleman back to the elevator, and he was on his phone texting the entire way back. So I don't recommend doing that. Make sure that you let them know how excited you are about the position. And of course, one of your classic questions that you can ask at the end is, what are the next steps in your hiring process? What is your expected timeline for making a decision for this position? And make sure you have the contact information for the main person that's conducting the interview, so you can send out your thank you notes. All right. So we've been talking a lot about preparation and setup, and now we are in for a treat because Calvin is going to go through a quick model interview for us. And we're going to go open up the video stream. So you should soon be able to see Calvin in the participants panel on the upper right side of your screen. So if you closed that panel previously, you may want to reopen it. All right. Oh. All right. So I'm going to set the stage for us here. Calvin Landrum recently applied for a position at Airbnb to be a site coordinator. He's got a video interview today, so let's see how this goes. Calvin, thank you for coming in to interview with us today. Can you please tell us, why are you interested in working for Airbnb?
You know, I love housing. I love bed and breakfasts. You know, I saw your Super Bowl commercial, and I was really inspired, you know. There's so many houses out there that are just dying for people to live in them, you know, we're just trying to get rent money. You know, when I think about all that rent money that is not being gotten, it really makes me sad. Really, you know, it really upsets me, you know, so I want to try to help you guys get as much money as we possibly can.
Okay. I see that you have something called AmeriCorps on your resume. Can you tell me more about that, please?
Yeah, let me tell you about it. It was really the worst experience of my life. I mean, you know, I did it. I didn't quit because, you know, my mother didn't raise a quitter. But I did it, you know, I don't know, my coworkers were off. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, sorry, I'm on an interview. I'll call you right back, Sorry. That was my brother. You know, so one day, you know, one of my coworkers came up to me and, you know, really had the nerve to ask me to complete my progress report like it was my job or something. You know, my boss didn't tell me to do it, so I didn't feel like I had to do it. You know, I tweeted about it, called some coworkers, told some people about it. AmeriCorps, don't know if I'd recommend it. It wasn't an awesome experience for me, but you know, now I'm here trying to find a new job. So you know, I think I was supposed to recruit volunteers or something. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, Calvin. What questions do you have for me?
Ooh, excellent question. I don't think that I have any. I think this went really well. I mean, you're cool. I'm pretty cool. So I think we're ready to start, you know, talking about where my desk is going to be, right? I mean, I would really love a window and a door, but a view of a TV would, you know, that'd be fine too, I think.
All right, Calvin, thank you for coming in today. We'll be in touch. Let me please escort you to the elevator.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about how Calvin could have prepared better for that interview. What could he have done? Ted said he nailed it.
Thanks, Ted.
Love it. Oh, boy. Please escort him to the elevator. Oh, they like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. So let's see. So what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Look into the camera, my outfit.
Maybe you could have checked your lighting and taken your party decorations down from the wall from the weekend.
What can I say? I love the party.
Yeah. So consider your outfit, and that is also important. You know, you really want to make sure that your outfit's not at the cleaners when you go to get dressed in the morning. Streamers were terrible.
My streamers were terrible?
In the phone call. Chasen says he probably should have had a beer in hand to complete the ensemble. I think you're right.
I know Chasen. Is that Chasen? Hey, Chasen.
All right, so Alicia says, I think the computer should have been propped up because the lower camera angle combined with the low lighting made you look like a movie villain.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do a take 2 and see if we can't improve. Oh, good point by Caitlin. She wouldn't even set her phone to vibrate. Turn it all the way off. So that's important. Did you do that, Calvin, for this take 2?
We'll see. You know, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Well, you know, I guess you're just gonna have to watch and find out. Okay.
Somebody's still having trouble seeing the video, so just make sure that you are looking at the participants panel on the upper right side of your screen.
Yeah, and if you're on a phone or if you're never badmouth the previous job, also a good point. If you're on a phone or an iPad or a tablet, you may have some issues with the video function. I'm not sure. It's definitely going to work best if you're on a desktop, and you just click on that participants tab, and then you should be able to see it. And FYI, you can't see anything right now. No one's presenting, but we will be soon.
All right, so take 2. You ready? Okay. Calvin, thank you for coming in today. Can you tell us why you're interested to work for Airbnb?
Yeah, totally. But before we start, can you hear me? Can you see me okay? Is everything all right over there?
Oh, thank you for that sound check. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Calvin.
All right, good. Well, you know, as an avid traveler and frequent user of Airbnb, I'm pretty well attuned to the type of experience and community that you're trying to create. I have personally had an experience in curating that experience in several positions that I've had previously. And it's really something that drives a lot of the work that I do. I really believe that creating a unique and inclusive environment where people feel safe and can explore is really at the heart of the Airbnb mission, and it's something that I strive to do frequently and in any job that I have coming up. I'm excited to work for your company because I really believe in the healing aspect of community and the immeasurable impact on a person's life that getting outside of their own environment can have. You frequently have been at the top of best places to work list, so that's another good reason. Why wouldn't I want to work there? And honestly, it's really an honor to be having this interview.
Wonderful. Thank you, Calvin. I see on your resume that you did something called AmeriCorps. Can you tell me more about that, please?
Yeah, totally. So AmeriCorps is a national service program that places thousands of volunteers in communities around the United States. I was one of those members, one of those AmeriCorps members, and I worked at a YMCA camp in Michigan. I was there developing curriculum for their kindergarten through 12th grade camps. And during my time, I did everything from creating a comprehensive community assessment, to designing a new curriculum for camp counselors that addressed diversity and culture and really how to manage those things. I even led a few sing-alongs during my time as a camp counselor. My AmeriCorps experience really was life and career defining, and it really pushed me to my creative extremes. And it helped me build resourcefulness, which honestly I think is one of the most important qualities that any employee can have these days.
Great, thank you for that. What questions do you have for me?
Thank you for asking. I really have just a few. So if I were to be selected for this position, can you tell me a little bit about the team that I'd be working with and the projects that you currently have in development? Also, I read your diversity and inclusion, I read about your diversity and inclusion initiatives, and I really think they're fascinating. I know that the position that I'm applying for doesn't necessarily overlap with those, but I was wondering if there was any opportunity in this position to interact with those issues, because those are some passions of mine and something that I'd really like to get into.
Wonderful. All right, Calvin, well, thank you so much for coming in today, and we really look forward to following up with you.
Of course, thank you for having me.
All right, so let's do a little debrief.
I'm nervous.
What was different about this interview? What went well? Fist pump. Nice.
we're getting less totally, maybe. Sorry about my totally.
I need some lessons from Calvin. Isn't that nice? No crazy parties.
I say a lot. I know, girl. I know. I'm sorry. Spoke all about AmeriCorps.
True. You're really on the. They're going to give you some feedback.
Oh, I know. Hey, this is good for me because I'm going to have to interview for something soon. Let's see.
I was teasing Calvin earlier because I said, "Where's your blazer, Calvin?"
I know. I didn't wear a blazer.
I'm a little old school. I like to have
She does like the blazer. So watch the page flipping. I'm sorry. I'll totally try to. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do better next time. Thanks, Shodi, for having my background.
Leanne saying he did his research.
Did the research.
Kara wants to know where you're from, Calvin.
No crazy party streamers. I'm from Texas. That's where I'm from. Much more articulate, was prepared. That was totally
clear.
Emphasize the work. Good prepared questions. Thanks, guys. Better clothes. Oh, I had better clothes? I'm gonna take it like that. Cleared the sound check. I think honestly, that's one tip that I think you can take from this is do that sound check. Take a second to say, hey, can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay. I think that'll take you far.
And a couple of other things that this is just reminding me to mention. You're not, Calvin, but if one is a sweater, someone who perspires, I've been in those interviews too, and it's not pretty, but some people are like that, and that's okay. But just bring a little tissue or a handkerchief to blot yourself. Pat a little bit. And that's another reason to arrive early. If it's hot outside, you can just cool down. And it's also really important to have water. You don't want to have dry mouth during an interview. so definitely bring water with you. So just thinking about those housekeeping things are really important.
Yeah, and look at that, and you know, and lighting makes a huge difference. You know, I was kind of underlit. I you know, it didn't look great the first time, but you know, the second time, being very well lit, being presentable, and kind of having the camera at eye level. I actually set my laptop on a box. I mean, you guys can't see that, but I can tell you, I put it on a box so that it is eye level with me, and I'm able to look directly into the camera.
Super. So we'll get rid of the wiggly worm.
No more wiggly worm. Yeah, don't be a wiggly worm. Make sure that you frame yourself. That you frame yourself well, you know, in the screen, in the photo.
I like what Kristen said. Tailor your outfit to the culture, not necessarily to the job. That's really important. I think if you're going to interview with a bank, you're going to have a full suit on. If you're interviewing at a tech company, maybe you go the you know, button-down shirt route or the black turtleneck.
I'm interviewing at Airbnb. I think a red flannel is
you're right,
totally
Calvin.
cool. You know, it's appropriate for the job.
You're right, Calvin.
I definitely would have worn a suit and tie where I'm applying maybe for this job.
Yes. All right, yes, you can always use humor to help any awkward situation. All right, so I'm going to move along to our last slide, and then we can open it up for questions. Some people wonder about the follow-up. You definitely should send your thank you notes within 24 hours. Some people ask, is email fine, just an email? If your interview is over the phone or Skype, I would say email is fine. If you interview in person, again, I'm a little old school on this. I like to have a handwritten note, especially if you really want the job. I think a handwritten note is a very nice touch, and make sure that there are no typos in that as well. But it's really important to send those thank you notes within 24 hours of your interview. And then don't be afraid to follow up. You know, a lot of jobs will have the contact information. I mean, one, you have the contact information for the person that you interviewed with, but, you know, sometimes you can also follow up with the HR department. But if it's been 1 to 2 weeks past the date in which you expected to hear something, go ahead and reach out. And it's an opportunity for you to remind them who you are, to reiterate how much you would like to work there and how qualified you are for the position. So that's really a great opportunity to just reach out again. And even though I think some people are hesitant to do that, please don't be, unless they've said no follow-up calls. But if you've already had the interview, then I would highly recommend doing that follow-up. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and turn it over to Q&A.
I'm going to ask but before we get to that, I do want to bring up the evaluation. For those of you who've been on these before, you know this spiel, but on the right side of your screen, you're going to find a quick poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. So please take a moment to answer the questions, because we really want to be able to improve these. We work pretty hard on these and really want to make sure that you're getting exactly what you want and what you need. I'm about to start doing the planning for next year's webinars, so I'm looking for some good input from you guys to kind of help me out with that. So if you have any ideas for guest speakers that you'd like to hear, any certain or specific topics that you'd like to hear, take a second and fill out that evaluation and just let me know, because I read every single comment and we'll be looking to that for guidance for the coming year to make sure that you're getting exactly what you want. So please, 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 if you don't do anything else, just take a moment to answer those questions for us. We really, really appreciate it. So that being said, let's get on to our Q&A portion. I'm going to ask our operator one more time to remind us how to ask questions via phone.
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then 1, and record your first and last name. To withdraw your question, you may press star, then 2. Again, to ask a question, please press star, then 1, unmute your phone, and record your first and last name. One moment for the first question, please.
All righty, thank you so much. So while we're waiting for that, we have a couple questions queued up that we're going to go ahead and answer between Liz and I. So Eric says, what's the best way to, he says, name dropping from your LinkedIn research. What's the best way to do that, or how do you do it? That's a good question. Like, how do you, casually slip in someone and be like, oh, so-and-so works here.
Right. Yeah, there's a difference between stalking and doing research. So there is a fine line there. if someone has, is active on social media and they've put that they've worked at different places, I don't think that it comes across as name dropping or creepy in a stalking way if you say, oh, I noticed that a few years ago you worked at X company. I know somebody that works there too. Looks like we both know, Joe. I think that's fine.
Yeah, and I would say don't be ashamed also if that's public information. If someone has it on their LinkedIn profile exactly where they've worked, it's kind of assumed nowadays that people are researching you. I think we're getting to a point when people say, if someone came up to me and was like, oh, I saw you on your LinkedIn that you did this, I'd be, oh, okay, cool, I put that out there. Like, I'm fully expecting someone to look at that. That's the reason I put it out there. So I think it's okay if you can make that connection to say, where you saw it, why you think it's important, and why you think, and why it's valuable to bring up in that situation. Good question. Our next question is, in the past, I've brought printed copies of my resume, cover letter, and references. Is that still recommended?
I would recommend still bringing copies of your resume, but I don't think you need to bring your cover letter. And references, you really, if you get to that point, they'll ask for it. And this day and age, I think it's usually, here's an email address. So I would just focus on bringing copies of your resume.
Yeah, totally. All right, so our next question is, and just a reminder, guys, if you're putting your questions in the chat, we may not be able to find them, so go ahead and put them in the Q&A to make sure that we can at least try to get to them. So Kristen says, when is the appropriate time to start a conversation about salary? Salary is a major factor when making a decision to accept a position, so why am I expected to waste a bunch of time applying, interviewing, researching if the job doesn't pay?
Sure, good question. So I think obviously sometimes a salary is posted in the original job description, so you at least know what range it is that you're dealing with. I think if the interview has been going well and you sense that it's headed in a positive direction and you don't want to waste your time if it's really a lot less than you can afford to live on, then you can bring it up and you can say something to the effect of, can you tell me a little bit about the salary range for this position? So that gives them a little wiggle room as opposed to an exact amount as well. But I think, you should get a sense if it's going well, and I think it'd be fine to ask that towards the end if that seems to be an issue.
Yeah, and I think if you're apprehensive to say the word pay or salary or bring it up, talk about the benefits. Again, if you think that it's going well and you're like, okay, I feel like maybe I have a good shot at this, I think it's okay to say, as part of those questions to ask, what benefits are included in this job? What do you offer your employees? And then kind of have that conversation segue into a salary conversation.
That's a great point. Yep.
And also you might find, so sometimes that benefits will, having a lot of employee benefits will equal out to maybe a lower salary. If you have a lower salary, that's made up by having these really great benefits. Maybe you do have unlimited time off, or you have, maybe your employer provides lunch every day, something like that, where you're like, okay, I can take that as opposed to
or healthcare, really good healthcare.
Yeah, totally. All right, so let's see, our next question is, if you are pregnant going into an interview, should you try to cover your pregnancy? What is the best way for your pregnancy not to become a barrier? That's an excellent question.
It really is, and I think, depending on how far along you are, if it's earlier on, I would try to make it not an issue. I have experienced at one position that I was at, a woman was offered the job, but it hadn't come up in the interview, and she said, I just want you to know I'm due, in 6 months. I completely understand if this is not a good fit, but I really do want the job, and I will, I'm very dedicated. I think that's fine. So that is a little bit of a tricky one, but I think it's fine to, and I think employers are a little bit more understanding about that this day and age. So hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Yeah. Let's see. Carmen says, how do you ask next steps without sounding like you're asking if you got the job?
I think you talk about the process. You know, what is your timeline? When are you hoping to make a decision? What is the, you know, what is the next step in the interview process? Are you all planning on a second round of interviews? You know, you can talk more about the process and less about if you've actually closed the deal.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. Let's see. Brittany says, what is appropriate these days to wear to an in-person interview, especially for women? It can be confusing and ambiguous, especially if you're not necessarily going into a super corporate setting.
All right, I'll take that one, Brittany. So I am a big believer in the blazer. I don't think you have to wear a suit. You can wear a skirt or pants with a blazer. You could also, you know, if it is a more casual place, you could probably wear a really nice sweater, but or blouse. But I do think for an interview, a blazer just sets a certain professional tone. And obviously you don't want to wear heels that are really, really high. So just, you know, you're not going clubbing, you're going to an interview. So I think just keeping that in mind, the appropriate length of a skirt. I think you can still express your personality through your jewelry. You certainly don't want to hide your personality when you come. I want to know. That's the other thing about all this interview process, right? As an employer, I want to know who you are and the different ways that you can share who you are, whether it's through your outside extracurricular activities, what clubs you're part of, you know, when you were in school or what have you. I think that's really important, and it reveals more about your personality because you do spend a lot of time with the people that you work with. So it's important for it to be a good fit on both sides.
Yeah, and I can't answer for women because it's not my place. But I do think that for guys, you know, if you're what to wear to an in-person interview, I mean, you definitely probably want to have your shirt tucked in, you know, probably stay away from jeans, even though I'm guilty of jeans in all occasions. I have like all occasion pants, and they're just my jeans. I wear them all the time. But you know, you're definitely going to want to tuck in that shirt. Someone said suit and tie always. I'm not super sold on suit and tie always because...
It also depends on where you live in the country, right? Yeah. The West Coast is a little bit more laid back. The East Coast, not as much. The South, a little bit laid back. So taking that into consideration as well.
Ask some friends who maybe have had interviews lately. Say, hey, what did you wear? Did you feel like you were overdressed or underdressed? You know, any cute outfit ideas. And do a little fashion show. It's fun. Someone says, in cover letter, should we introduce the acronym VISTA or just leave it as the acronym?
Great question. I would, in your first mention of it, say AmeriCorps, VISTA, and then put in parentheses, volunteers in service to America. I think that's probably the best way to do it. And then every reference after that, you can either say AmeriCorps, VISTA, or just VISTA.
Totally. And I'm going to pause right there for a second to see if we have any questions on the phone.
Currently showing no questions. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star then 1 and record your first and last name.
All right, thank you. Evan says, how do you balance a concise explanation of AmeriCorps versus my genuine perspective of my service? So I guess he's saying, you know, if my service didn't live up to my expectations or it was something, you know, maybe different than what the program might have been, how do you sort of balance that? And Evan, I think for me, I think my suggestion is to always just like err on the side of the positive, you know, on those things. Like if you had not a stellar experience, talk about the things that were good, because you don't want to bring up like, you know, say, oh, it was so terrible. I mean, you saw me in that fake interview, you know, and I'm like, oh, I hated it so much, it was garbage. Like you don't want to be that negative of a person. And I don't want to say that like interviews are not the time for you to be truthful, but you have some wiggle room, I think, in an interview and like, and sort of what you say. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the best way to say that without telling you to like lie in your interview. But I think, you know, if you find yourself at odds, give only the details that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see what else we got. Is it okay to email a thank you letter, or is the old school way of snail mail better?
I would say if you're going to do snail mail, I would do both, because the email is going to get there right away, and you don't know how long the snail mail is going to take. And here in the federal government, our mail goes through a process, so it takes even longer. So if you're like me and like to get out the stationery and send a note, just go ahead. There's no harm in duplicating there. Send the email and then also send the snail mail.
Yeah. Chris Ricciardi, I think I said that right, or Ricciardi, said, if your VISTA experience was the most relevant to the position you're applying to, can you make it more of a focus on in your interview, or should it only be a small part?
You can definitely make it more of the focus. What I was trying to say earlier is don't have examples only from one experience. So even though you may talk about your AmeriCorps experience the most, make sure you have a couple of examples and you're drawing from other aspects of your life, whether it was a volunteer position or an organization that you were a part of, even if it wasn't if there's not another job that you can pull from.
Let's see, and if you interview with a search committee or team, who do you address your thank you note to? The head of the committee?
Sure, yeah, I would do it to the head of the committee, and then you can either, if it's an email, say, please pass along my message to the rest of the team. But it is better to use somebody's name as opposed to dear search committee if you actually have the person's name.
Totally. Peter says, what social media posts are allowed? What will sync your higher ability? I really love this question because I think it's so interesting. I don't know. I think it's so hard because I think anything that's like super divisive could be a flag for people. You know, if you're like super pro one issue, you know, in all of your tweets, you know, and you're like this one thing, maybe the person that you're interviewing with, they have the opposite view. Like, you really never know what's going to catch someone off guard or what's going to catch someone's eye and say, like, no, I don't like this person. I'm writing them off because they talked about this, and this.
Yes, that's a really good point. I also think any, you know, I don't want to see your spring break pictures, you know, and drinking beer on the beach. Like, it just, you know what's inappropriate in terms of that. So I just think it's not a responsible use of social media in a professional setting. So anything that's politically divisive or socially revealing in a not flattering way, I think is just telling, I think, of someone's judgment. Really.
Yeah, totally. You know, and I mean, I know for myself personally, I don't have any reference to my position here. It's completely separate from my job. You wouldn't really know that I worked here unless you were like my friend and you had access to photos, and even then, you know, like, everything's just hidden. Like, because I don't feel that need to like share that with everyone, you know. And it's, for me, my rule of thumb is always just really keep them separated. I barely add people to my social networks from work, you know, because it makes me kind of weird, like, to have that separation.
I'm not friends with Calvin on Facebook, but I don't take it personally.
Me and Liz are not friends on Facebook. All right, so Rachel says, I will be interviewing with a current organization that I'm serving with. What things, if any, should I do differently in the interview since I already have a relationship with the organization?
That's a great question, Rachel. And I still remember to this day at a previous job that I had, we were interviewing an intern to come on board full-time. And I was so impressed because she took it so seriously. She got her interview suit on, and she acted as if, you know, she didn't have any inside scoop on the organization in terms of that, and I just thought she was just very professional. So I would come across as being on the more reserved, polite side, but of course you can use the knowledge that you have, having served there. I mean, that's going to really, that puts you in such a great position. But just treat it as a very professional situation, and I think you'll probably do very well.
Totally. Let's see. Kristen says, I have letters of recommendation that I would like to bring with me to help in the decision-making process. I would have it attached to the back of my resume. Is that acceptable? No, actually, I wouldn't do that. If they want the letters of recommendation, they'll ask for it. I don't. My first inclination is to not do that. Yeah, mine too, and that's sort of that's the advice that I've always heard is don't provide a letter of recommendation unless someone asks for it. Yeah. I know it seems like and I definitely understand like the mindset of saying like, oh, here's all this information, here's also these people saying that I'm capable of doing this, and I want to give it to you all up front. but I definitely, I wouldn't offer it until it's requested, I think. Let's see, this is a fun question. Who should be responsible for keeping time, the interviewers or the interviewee? I recently had an interview go long and it messed up schedule.
I bet it did. So I would say it really is the interviewer that, you know, it's up to them. However, you can say something like, you know, I know you all must be really busy. You know, I just have one more question and then I can be on my way.
Yeah, or just saying, hey, I want to be respectful of your time. Are we going long or are we going short? How much time do we have left for this interview? And I think that's super appropriate and a good question to ask someone. Let's see, is it acceptable to ask about how many other candidates there are? Oh.
I think so. That's an interesting question. I guess I would ask, why is that important? I think you can just assume that almost every job is pretty competitive. I have had someone tell me, oh, it's between you and another candidate. Mm-hmm. So I think if you get to like a second round of interviews and it's becoming clear that you may be getting an offer, I think in that case it may be appropriate to just say, I'm just curious, have you had a lot of people apply for this position or something like that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm still like, I'm kind of simmering on that one. Is it acceptable to ask how many other candidates there are? So I feel like that could make you look overeager, but also, I don't know. It's a fine line. I think there's maybe like a certain point in time when that's an acceptable question to ask. Like you said, like once you're getting down to the wire, you're getting maybe a second interview or getting close to getting like a, you know, if they're getting close to making a decision, I think that's, you know, you're getting more appropriate there. Please think of webinars for those of us in the older generation. It can make a big difference when moving on from AmeriCorps to Afterlife. Thank you for that tip, Leslie Vivial. Leslie, if you have any specific suggestions, let me know, and I will we'll definitely take a look at that. Let's see. I've been asked, what pay do I expect? I've always answered the minimum by law, even with experience in master's program, my master's degree. Am I undervaluing myself by using that as my answer?
There's nothing, you should have a number in mind. Like, you really do not want to accept a position less than X dollar amount. So if you're at, and you know, the other thing is everything's negotiable, and this is an opportunity for you to highball it and then go down from there if you have to. So I would not sell yourself short, and I would have your lowest number in mind that you really would want to accept, and then I'd raise it by like $5,000. Mm-hmm.
Give yourself some wiggle room.
Yeah.
And then if they're like, okay, cool, you're like, yeah, exactly. I just made $5,000 extra dollars. That's what's up.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. Lars Anderson says, are companies, organizations usually receptive to informational interviews? That is, learning from a current member about the company prior to applying or job interviewing.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure if you mean there's a job opening and you're asking to come in for an informational interview for that position. That's not so much, but if you're just wanting to work at that company and you've met somebody or you can connect to someone and ask them for an informational interview, by all means, but I think it gets a little awkward, and I'm not sure if that's what you intended if you ask for an informational interview for a job that's posted.
Yeah, totally. And I would reframe that question a little bit even to say, you know, are employees of an organization usually receptive? Because I think like a company or organization as a whole, like the culture could not be, you know. But I do think, yeah, again, it's super appropriate to ask if you're just interested in a company or interested in a specific career to ask about that. But if you're asking so that you can get a leg up on the competition for an interview that you have, that may not go over so well with people. Let's see. Sarah Johnson, how can I best use my VISTA experiences in my future job as compared to applying to jobs before VISTA? Ooh, I don't think if I get that. I am not done until next March, but I'm beginning to network now in this state because I want to stay here. Any advice is greatly appreciated. How can I best use my VISTA experience?
Sure. So I think if I understand what you mean, how can I best use my VISTA experiences in my future job as compared to applying to jobs before VISTA? Well, my first thought about what you meant, and maybe this is not what you meant, but, you know, there really are qualities that you all gain by having done the AmeriCorps VISTA experience. Those qualities include being resourceful, being flexible, being adaptable, and there's just a certain tenacity and grit about you. I know for myself, I have been able to carry that throughout my entire career. I don't say no to people. If I don't know the answer, I go find it somewhere else. So if you're talking about using your VISTA experiences in, you know, future job opportunities, then that's another way that you can talk about it. If you're talking about the fact that you're not done until March and you need a variety of things to pull upon, one, I think you're doing a great job by participating in webinars like this and doing your research to put yourself in a good situation for job searching, even though you're not done until next March. And I would say you really want to kick it in high gear by January or so of next year, and then you can pull upon your VISTA service as well as anything that you might have done in school or volunteering prior.
Yeah, totally. So we have a little over, we have about 6 minutes left and 2 questions left that we're going to get to, but I want to go back to the phone one last time to see if we have anyone there.
Still showing no questions from the phone.
All right, wonderful, thank you. So Zamara says, what is your take for someone who has been in the professional workforce for a couple of decades? I've had a director positions in nonprofit and academia as related to VISTA. I've been told that I'm overqualified, and I think that I saw something about this up top where someone said, you know, how do you, yeah, here it is. I've had director positions in nonprofits and academia. I've been told I'm overqualified.
Sure.
To understand, like, how do you, say, like, yeah, I've been a director, but I stopped doing that to become a VISTA member, and this is why that's important and valuable.
So, Kimberly, I think that's very valid, and I think you can talk about VISTA in terms that I'm not sure your motivation for serving and how it goes with the rest of your career, but a lot of people use it to career pivot. So perhaps you were in one field in academia and in other director positions in nonprofits, and your VISTA experience has put you in a different subject matter expert. So you can kind of spin it that this was really a great opportunity for you to serve your country and do something really important, and you were also able to do a bit of a career pivot, and again, not knowing your full situation, but hopefully I think that there are definitely positive ways to spin your experience, and when people get told they're overqualified, that makes me sad, because it's really, the experience is so valued. So I don't know what your resume looks like, but one trick around that is you can say, even if you've been in the workforce for 25 years, you can say things like, over 15 years of experience, because 25 is over 15. So there are ways to do that to get your foot in the door for the interview, and then hopefully at that point you can really wow them with all of the experiences that you've had. Yeah,
and I think something, and my sort of like my take on this, or my immediate reaction, is that the people interviewing you are generally going to be managers. They're going to be people who have been doing this for a while. You're not going to be interviewed by the person that just started last week, because they don't know the job yet. So I think there's a certain amount of understanding that comes in those positions of if you're able to explain to me why you did this, I can take that, and don't be intimidated by the person interviewing you, because they're just another person in the room. They have something that you want, but they're just people, So if you're able to explain, yeah, I left because while that was fulfilling, it was, I've always wanted to do this other thing, and I saw this as an opportunity to be able to, like you said, change direction in my life and go after something else, I'm really interested. I have all these qualifications and all of the stuff that I can bring to this position. I'm here interviewing, so I feel that I'm qualified for this job. Don't tell me that I'm overqualified. I'm here. I'm here doing it. I'm comfortable with my level of qualification as matched with this position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we have another question here. It says, if you're interviewing for a position by reference from a connection that has not been posted online yet, so someone just told you about a job that's coming up and you're going to apply for it, is it appropriate to ask for a job description before the interview? And my answer is yes, it is, because I've actually been in this position. A friend reached out and said, hey, this job's opening up at my company in Seattle. Would you like to interview for it? Because I can ask my boss. And I was like, yeah, of course I would. What is the job? It's almost necessary. I mean, I think appropriateness is not even the right word. It's necessary that you ask for that job description, because you've got to be prepared. You've got to be able to, especially if you're going to interview for it. I mean, if you're not going to interview for it, then yeah, you still need it because you need to know what you're getting yourself into. But definitely, if you're going to have to interview for it, if it hasn't been posted, ask for that description, because you need to know what you're getting yourself into and how can you prepare. What questions you should ask, or anything like that.
Absolutely, and congratulations, because it sounds like you've done your networking to be able to have that opportunity. So that's great.
Absolutely. So let's see. If you're, we'll do this one last question, because I think it's important to know, and we get asked it a lot. Tyler says, if you're applying for a job before your term ends, how do you convey that to the interviewer?
Sure. So I think you can say that, you're an AmeriCorps VISTA member, it's a commitment for a year, you're very dedicated to your organization, and that you are available as of whatever date. I think, it really is very frowned upon from our end to leave early. We understand that sometimes there are circumstances like that, but usually employers will respect your desire to keep your commitment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's an important sticking point there is, I've made this commitment to this for 1 year. Explain to them, the repercussions of you ending your job early. I mean, I think that's okay to say, look, I've made this commitment. I've been doing this. I'm going to be receiving an education award to help me pay for my education. Finishing out this term is only going to make me a better candidate for you. I'm going to be more focused. I'm going to be less worried about my financial situation. I'm going to be prepared if you allow me to finish out my year of service.
And if you're applying for a federal position, you will not get your non-competitive eligibility status if you leave a day early.
Yep, definitely.
So, all right.
All right, so that was an incredible round of questions.
Thank you all
everybody. So much. That's the most questions we've gotten in a while. If you have any other questions that we weren't able to get to, please reach out to us. You can email vistawebinars@cns.gov, which is going to be on the next slide. You'll see that email address up there. So if you have anything that we weren't able to get to, email them to there, and we'll be sure to get back to you. I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. This was a great success, and it was very fun to do. So thank you all so much for being here. Please make sure that you join us for our next webinar, Demystifying Stakeholder Engagement. That's going to be on May 23rd. At the same time, same place. You'll get that in an email. You get a registration link or whatever, and you can sign up for that. You can also find it on the VISTA campus. Visit the webinars page, and you can join us for that one. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Liz. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for all the work you put in on this one.
Thank you for your role-playing acting skills, Calvin.
Oh, I try. Do what I can. My improv classes are paying off. All right, thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.